back to another episode of Geeks Like Me, and once again, thank you for joining. Today on the show, we have tabletop gaming enthusiast Gregg Barlow joining us to talk a little bit about tabletop gaming. Gregg, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So, you do a lot of tabletop gaming, okay, but there are many different types of tabletop gaming. Can you explain to us the different types?
Well, that's a very broad topic. So I can give you an overview of where tabletop goes, but to cover it in depth would take a while.
Just a general, different types,
Okay, so in other words, if you were dipping your foot into the tabletop pool?
Yes.
What could you hope to find and where? Okay. Well, to start off with, one of the most common tabletop things that most often gets played is collectible card games. It generates a lot of interest, and it's very easy to get into because you've just got to start buying a few small packs of cards, and then once you get going, it quickly snowballs into many packs of cards. But it's often a gateway game for tabletop gamers.
Okay, and different varieties. Some of the card games that you play and that's out there.
Well, traditionally one of the most popular ones is Magic the Gathering, which I see you've got a lovely poster of here. That's very common, very popular, done by Wizards of the Coast. And how it's so common and so popular that most game stores will stock it. And it's what's known as a collectible card game, or CCG. And what that means is you don't know what cards you're getting when you buy your packs. So your boosters are blind, you've got to buy a booster. Hopefully you'll get that one rare card you really, really want. We can only, you never get it. But hopefully you'll just buy another one and get it. So eventually, after buying lots of boosters, you'll be able to build a deck. And with that deck, you'll be able to play. Otherwise, alternatively, I've also got another one here. This is Android Netrunner.
That looks fascinating.
Yes, so this is done by Fantasy Flight. And what this is a living card game as opposed to a collectible card game.
Difference being?
And the difference being is that you always know which cards are where. So whenever they release a new expansion, they'll release a card list and you'll know exactly which cards are in which boosters. So you're never blind buying. You can always know exactly what you're going to get. So if you have a particular deck in mind that you want to build, you just go out and buy this expansion, this expansion, this expansion, and you can build your deck.
Okay. Yeah. Now, something like Magic is tournament-based, like you play tournaments competitive.
Yes.
Netrunner, the same?
Also, not as big as Magic because it's not as popular, it hasn't built as big a player base. But there are a few groups in South Africa that do play. Not as, like Magic is so popular, you get something called Friday Night Magic, which is literally every Friday night, everyone will show up at their favorite friendly local gaming store and play Magic for the night. But Netrunner, because it's not as well known and not as popular, generally there's dedicated groups to it, but they'll only play it about once a month, maybe once every few months. They'll get together and have a game.
Another type of tabletop gaming that you get.
Okay, well that's card games, right? Like I said, collectible and living. You can then move on. Okay, so board games, I like to break down into several categories of board game.
Several, wow.
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
Once again, it'll take a while to go through everything, but I'll give you a broad overview of what I like to call them. So I'll start off with something I call filler games, right? These are your little tiny games that generally come in boxes about this size. Filler games you'll find generally have higher player counts because they're designed to be quick running, fill in the gaps between bigger games because a lot of board games take many hours to complete. But a filler game you can get done in maybe half an hour, 40 minutes, and everyone's generally shouting at each other. Well, it depends on the game. Like Chitty Mages here, for example, you're all playing wizards who are watching monsters battle in an arena, and you're actually betting on the monsters, on who's going to win. So it's obvious who's going to win. I mean, like, there's a dragon versus a goblin. The dragon's going to win. But you also happen to be Chitty Mages. So you all place your bets, and then whilst the fight is going on, depending on which judge is drawn, you can subtly influence you can make the goblin twice as big, or you can make the dragon half as big, or you can make the goblin invisible, or you're literally cheating. And if the judge doesn't catch you, you can make your guy win. But the other players don't know how you're cheating often, so they have to guess what you've done. You could be making him smaller or bigger. They don't know. So it turns out to be quite a fun little quick game. Runs in 40 minutes or so, especially if everyone knows the rules. Flows quickly. And it's perfect to fill the gap between those big, meaty board games. Also, sometimes what happens is, because a board game has a lot of setup time, I've known people who, one person's like, okay, I'll do the setup this time, and he goes off to the side and starts setting it up, and then everyone else plays a quick game of filler, and then it rotates, so then the next time someone else does the setup. And all in all, it keeps things flowing at your gaming days.
Cool.
Yeah, so that's GD Majors. There's lots of other small filler games that you can get. Like I said, often the most characteristic thing is they come in smaller boxes because they've got less components and they run a lot quicker. I recommend them for any board game aficionado. But yeah, because then you move on to your meatier games, right? And that can include things like Euro-style board games. Okay, this is Kingsburg. Now, when I say Euro-style, what that means is it comes from the word European, because the European board games in general are non-directly confrontational. Okay, which means that you won't ever directly stab your foe with your sword, but you will be trying to beat them in some way. So, like for example in Kingsburg, you're all playing advisors to the king, right? So you all want to be top-notch in the king's books, but to do that you're each given like a district to govern, and how you build up your district determines whether or not you will survive when the goblins attack or whatever, and how much resources you generate for the kingdom. So in the end you're all trying to get score, and the score is based off how well your district is doing. And it's entirely up to you how you build your district. You could like make it into a brewing district that makes a lot of beer and makes everyone happy. You could turn it into a military district so it fights off goblins easily or whatever. But at the end of the day, you never influence your opponent's districts at all. Like, you can't destroy their buildings. You can't. All you can do is build the better engine than them, the better points engine. So this type of indirect combat is a lot more strategic, in my opinion. Because it is a lot less straightforward. You've got to sort of think around, what is my foe doing? Like, which direction is he going in with that build that he's trying to build all those breweries or whatever.
This is the Euro style, so there's another style, more
yes.
aggressive,
Okay.
full impact.
So the Western style is far more direct conflict. An example I brought here today is Small World, which is one of my favorite direct style games. Okay. Now this is, once again, you're in charge of your own section, in this case your own little race. And the way they generate the races is delightful, because they take a pile of adjectives and they shuffle them up, and a pile of fantasy races and they shuffle them up, and then they randomly pair them together. So you end up with things like tunneling gnomes, and flying giants, and bloodthirsty elves, and it's like, oh. So, and then each person sort of gets a race, and then you're sort of directly marching on other people's lands. So this is a much more Western style game, because you can directly influence how you, like if you really wanted to, you could focus on Bob, because Bob was really annoying you the other day, so you just ruthlessly decimate Bob's lands, even though he's not winning, because you're just a mean person. I don't know. Yeah, so that's Small World. You'll find board games in general will fall into one of these two categories, either sort of indirect or direct. And generally that's influenced. Nowadays you're getting a lot of crossover between the two, as hybrids are created. But in general they'll stick to the one formula or the other. Yeah, that's direct style board games. Small World is a fun little game. Depends how many players you have is playtime. So it could be anything between an hour to 2 hours, and also if everyone knows the rules. Lots of expansions too, because it is so popular. Great game.
Cool. I've heard about a thing called role playing. tabletop role playing. What is that entitled?
Okay, so this is a little bit different in that it doesn't have a board and it doesn't have components. It does use dice, however. I've got a lovely 2 sets of dice here to show you an example. Now, these dice, as you'll see, are wonderful and strange looking in that they're far different from your usual 6-sided dice, which is what you normally see in a lot of games. In that you also get 10-sided dice and 12, the often forgotten 12-sided dice, who is alone and very, very rarely used. The 20-sided dice, which is very common, everyone loves the 20-sided dice, and then other many sides. You can even roll 100 sides by rolling two 10-sided dice. Right, so what these dice are then used for is role-playing is kind of like an interactive storytelling with a base rule set to govern whether or not the story is successful. In that there's a rule book. This is from a role-playing game called Pathfinder. It's very popular. Some other people who've heard of it before may have heard of Dungeons and Dragons. Pathfinder has its roots in Dungeons and Dragons. And how it works is you have an overall storyteller for the game, often called the Dungeon Master or Games Master, DM or GM, and they will craft a basic overall story for the other players. And each of those players will then create a main actor in the story. And they will then act through the tale whilst the storyteller sort of plays the non-player role. So he's the rest of the world interacting with the party. And each of these people will then try and tell the story. And whether or not they succeed in what they're trying to do is determined by these dice. Depending on what they're doing and what the rule system is, you'll use different dice here and there. But in general, it's kind of like a mix of impromptu acting that has a bit of rules behind it to give it more structure.
So basically a game where you can live out a character
Yes.
without actually having to live out the
Yeah,
character.
yeah, exactly. So for example, if you really liked The Lord of the Rings, you could be like, oh, I want to really be an elf like Legolas, because I want the fair golden locks, and I want to fire my bow and slay 100 orcs. So you make this character, except you call him Legolas or something. But you know what? Like you've read up on the book, and elves aren't as interesting. Maybe you should try being a gnome. Yes, you'll be a gnome archer. And then suddenly it changes a little bit, and you've tweaked it, and you've added your own flavor. And then suddenly this gnome called Swarflin is born, as opposed to Larfalas. and immediately it becomes your own character and your own story. And he goes on adventures with the rest of the group, who've all made their own characters, and together they're adventuring together, essentially. Well, in this case, it's adventuring. There's any sort of instance you can think of, there's a role-playing game for it. So like there's hard sci-fi, there's fantasy adventures, there's being an accountant in an office. Depends entirely on what you want to do. There's even a role-playing game where you all play psychoses in one person's head. The game's called Everybody's Tim. And then every now and then one personality will take over the body and be able to do things whilst the other personalities all argue. So it's quite fun. But yeah, it's a great way to spend a few hours running around, either doing high adventure or robbing a bank or acting out stories and telling a tale. Because at the end of the day, that's what tabletop role-playing boils down to. And it's great fun.
Cool.